Hey everyone, my name is Everest, and I've worked in the IT industry for many years, specifically focused on DDI, DNS, DHCP, IP management. I've created a series of videos, and I'm creating a lot more, walking you through how to properly set up and configure BlueCat Networks IPAM solutions. Today, I'm going to talk generally very high level of the main products, which is the integrity products, which is the Address Manager, the BAM, as they call it, and the DNS DHCP server, BDDS. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about each tab and talk very high level about what options you have and what you can do. And then near the end of this video, which should be very quick, I'm going to go into the CLI, both the BAM and the BDDS, and I'm going to configure it where it has a statically assigned IP address, it has proper NTP settings, it has name server settings, and on both BDDS or on the BAM and the BDDS. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add it to the address manager. Okay, and I'll show you how to do that. Once I've added it, I'm going to assign some roles to that newly added server, that DHCP DNS, okay, and then I'm going to deploy it, and then we're done. And then in other series of videos, I'm going to go more in depth with each service and different functionalities and different configurations. For example, there's DHCP failover, XHA, right, integrations using DNSSEC as an example, JSS T-state configurations using T-state keys, and much more. Managing the database, and a lot of tips and tricks on how to manage and use the BlueCat Network software, which is something I use a lot of in my environment. Okay, so we'll start off with my IPAM tab. Now, it's pretty cool. I use it once in a while. If I click on here, I can see multiple different things. These are quick visuals that allow me to understand the health of my environment and be able to manage services in my environment very quickly. So there's workflow requests. So if someone makes a request to make a change or add a zone or add an IP space or whatnot, or make a modification of some sort, I can see that request right here by just logging in to the address manager. Also, there's also server statistics. So this allows me to quickly see the health, and maybe I can specify every single server here, but quickly see the health of the services and what they're doing. So every single managed DNS DHCP server, I can see the health of that server here within the address manager, a single source of truth. So I can see DNS services, network utilization, CPU, memory. This is all done via SNMP polls of those servers. So that's very useful to me. Okay, so let's go to the IP space. So in the IP space, this is where you would manage your IP addresses, v6, v4, as well as DHCP. And it's really easy to create a network here, and you have so many different options, as you can see. DHCP settings, gross realms, TCP keys, and much more. And to create a network is very easy. And I'm going to show you how to do that as well. This is just a block. It's a container that contains networks within it. There's also network templates, IP reconciliation. We'll really talk about that in this video today, but I'm going to go really in depth in how to configure it properly. Okay, so let's go to the DNS tab. DNS tab, as you can see, it allows you to manage your DNS resource records. You can create views, and within those views, you can create zones. As an example, I have example.com. And within that zone, you can create resource records as easily as clicking on new, and then going to, as an example, a host record. I'll show you more later in this video. You create subzones, DNSSEC, deployment options, options for that particular zone, right? Just give you a high level, right? Allow query, notify, allow update forwarding, allow zone transfers, and much more. So there's a lot of different DNS options that you can add. And deployment roles, we can assign which server is going to be the server that manages or is hosting example.com. So we'll talk more about that as well. Okay, and then the devices tab. This tab has multiple different sub-tabs for most realms, TCP keys, devices, Macs, MAC addresses, and you get a list of every MAC address that has ever connected to your network, and it lists here, or you can manually add it, and you can also create MAC pools as well to create policies and much more. And then there's a TFTP tab here, and that's pretty obvious what that's for. And then the servers tab lists all the servers, and here's one that I've added and removed and then added again just to show you how it's done. But this server here, this tab provides visibility into all the servers that you manage and servers that you don't manage. So you can add servers that you're not managing here, right? So you have a lot of visibility. So for example, you may have zones that you're not authoritative for in the cloud, for example, Google or AWS, right, or Azure. So you can add those servers here and have visibility into those zones and the IP addresses and whatnot. So there's a lot of information that you can see here. You can also schedule deployments, and I'll show you what that means. But high level, any changes you make, you need to deploy that to the server that is that has that role associated to it. So, for example, if you manually created a host record, you could stage it, or you can add that host record to the server by deploying to that server, pushing that resource record to that server. That's what a deployment is, very high level. Okay, and then there's the groups tab, right? And here you have tag groups, so you can tag objects, device types, right? You have locations as well. So this helps you organize all your objects in the address manager. It helps you quickly use search for objects. If you can see on the right-hand side at the top there as well. And then finally, but not least, is the administration tab. And you definitely be here a lot. And there's a lot of different stuff here, and I'm going to have to segment these videos to focus on specific sections of the administration tab, especially with the user and groups and database management and tracking. But very high level, this allows you to manage your DNS and DHCP services, manage the database, which is Address Manager uses a database to store all the data, of course, which is Postgres is the database that it uses. What's kind of cool here actually is under the General tab, you can see that there's version management and BlueCat DNS DHCP server patches. This is cool, especially if you're a big enterprise org and you have 50, 100 servers that you manage. So not only does Address Manager, which is a central repository of all your services, right? You'll have complete visibility into the health of your servers and be able to patch all your servers from one location, right? So that's pretty cool. So, for example, there are CVEs that are released with high severities on them, and when BlueCat gets these reports, they create a patch and then they send that to their customers. Now, once you get it, right, you would just go to the patches, the BlueCat DNS DHCP server patches. You apply the patch, you add the file, and then you add the patch to every single server in your environment, or specific servers in your environment. So that's quite neat, as well as patching the address manager as well. Again, you have users and groups. The authenticators, you can use external, authenticators, third-party authenticators like LDAP, TACAX, Radius to authenticate. And then there's also data management. So again, back to database management. There's a lot of things you can do here. Archive and purge your data. If you only want to keep a certain amount of data, for example, only the last 90 days. Database replication, so you can replicate your database to multiple different address managers for redundancy purposes, re-indexing, cleaning, and much more. And then there's a lot of visualization in terms of your DHCP. There's also the monitoring service management. So again, monitoring all your services via SNMP provides complete visibility into the health of your environment, and it supports V1, V2, and V3 SNMP. And then there's tracking, right? Tracking, there's lots of different things you can do. It's pretty cool. So event list, right? You don't know what's going on. You can go to the event list. You can see what's been happening in your environment with any user, especially if you log in as an admin account, right? Transaction history, you can see users that, whatever they're doing, if they're adding records, deleting, modifying records, manually deploying, or any scheduled deployments, you'll see everything there. You also see, for example, if something breaks, the first thing I do is I go into the transaction history and event list, and I see exactly what's been going on around the time that something broke. So once I understand what potential changes were made that broke DNS or DHCP, then what I can do is I can go to the data restore. The data restore allows me to restore something that was changed. So, for example, I may have deleted my server, or I may have deleted a host record, or I may have modified a host or CNAME or something that affects production, right? I can see that, and I just have to hit this little button, back here button, and that will restore that change, and I'm good to go again. So it reduces the amount of downtime, provides a lot of visibility into what's going on, and makes your role as an IT technician very easy in terms of visualizing what's going on, rather than looking through logs and logs and logs. And speaking of logs, there's also log management. So you can definitely add verbosity to your logs, especially if you're troubleshooting something. You can enable debug. You can have also your logs pushed to a SIM of your choice, right? So if you want to send it to a syslog server as an example, or Splunk, you can definitely do that as well. It's very easy to do. You can do it at the server level as well as through Address Manager. So again, this is just a high level of the BAM, the Address Manager, the management interface, the single pane of glass. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start. I'm going to go to the CLI, both the BAM and the BDDS, and I'm going to show you how to set it up. Okay, great. So right now I have SSH'd into the Address Manager. So I'm logged in as root with BlueCat appliances. You're able to log in as root, which is pretty good or bad depending on how you look at it. Okay. So the first thing I want to do, if I want to configure the BAM, what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in as admin to do that, and I'm going to log in again to set up the IP address, the gateway, right, the network. And I'll show you where you would go to set up the NTP server, name server, and things like that. So I'm going to type in SU space admin, enter. Okay, and you can see that this is called Proteus, and it's an old Greek. It's a Greek name. BlueCat doesn't use the word Proteus anymore for their address manager. It's called Address Manager now, so, or BAM for short. So that's the name you should go by, not Proteus, but just clarify the confusion about the two different names. Okay, so what I would do, the first thing I want to do is type in configure. Now, you don't have to type the whole word, just like in Cisco. You don't have to type in the whole word. You can tab a lot of that. So if I type in configure, I can see all the options I have. I have configure additional, firewall interface, licensed mail, name servers, and much more. I want to configure first off the interface, which is going to be the interface I use to set the IP address. So I type in interface, tab, enter, tab again. What options do I have? Modify, right? ETH0. ETH0 is always going to be the interface. This is the service interface that you want to set the IP address for. Okay, even though the address manager does have multiple other interfaces, this is the one you want to set to for the service. So I hit enter, I'll tab, and then I'll hit set. I can do reset. I can also do show. I do show. You're going to see that there's already an IP address assigned to it, right? What I'm going to do though is I'm going to show you how that's done. So I'm going to type in set. So I'm going to set the address. Tab. I have different options: duplex, address, speed. I'm going to set address. Space tab. Now it doesn't show me anything because it's asking for the address right now. 192.168.116.10. If I just do this, I'm going to get an error, okay? Because it wants to know what network this is going to be. So it's going to be a /24. I'm going to hit enter again. It says address already exists because the address does already exist. I'm going to save it anyways. Okay, I'm going to exit, which is going to go back one. I'm going to go back one more time, exit, type in configure again, and now I want to configure the gateway. So I'm going to type in configure network, enter, and then if I tab, I'm going to type in set default gateway, and my default gateway is going to be .1. You don't have to specify network, just hit enter. Gateway already exists. I type in show, I can see it, and then when I want to save a change, I just type in save. And I am done. So if I exit, and now there's other things that you can set. Licensing is important. You need to license it before you can deploy. The name server is useful. It doesn't need to be configured, but name server is useful, especially when you've configured a notification groups and you want the address manager to send a notification via email. It needs to have a name server configured, so that's what the name server is for. Also, the system time, that's also important, very important, because you want the BAM and the DNS DHCP servers, appliances, you want them to be in the same time zone to be able to manage those servers. Okay, and once that's all done, you can exit out of it. Okay, great. So I have just SSH'd into the BDDS. Okay, so again, the first thing I do, I'm logged in this room. First thing I do is log in as admin. So sudo admin, enter. You can see it's another Greek god. It's Adonis, which is the old name for BDDS today. So first thing I want to do is type in configure again. Same idea, same process. Configure interface. Now here's something. It says unable to configure interface that's currently under BAM control. So if it's not clear enough, this BDDS, which is still listed here, to be able to add it or set the IP address, it can't be in privileged control. Okay, so what I'm going to do, just for the demo, I'm going to delete this server. Okay, so it's deleted out of Address Manager, but in addition to that, I need to remove it from privileged control from the BDDS as well. So to do that, I type in configure system set state no privileged control. Enter, and then save. And if I type in show, I can see that it says no progress control. Great, perfect. Okay, so I'm going to exit and go back and configure interface again. And I should be able to. There we go. And I'm going to tab modify ETH0, enter, tab. I'm going to set it, address, and the address. So it's going to 168.11/24. Already exists. Save it. Show. That's perfect. Okay, now I have to set the gateway as well, so it knows how to get out. Configure network. Tab. I'm going to set default gateway. It's 1. Save. Show. And you can see the gateway has been set. Perfect. Okay, and then again, you have the same options here. Licensing, it has to be licensed. You have also query logging, system time, set up users, and much more. Okay, but I'm not going to set all that. I don't need to. Not for this demo, anyways. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to expand the address manager, remove the CLI interface, and I'm going to add the server. Okay, great. So let's go to the Servers tab. And sometimes you need to click on these tabs twice because it will, if you click on the first one, it will go to the last thing that was open. So click on it twice so you're on the right page. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is let's add the server. So I'm going to go to New. I'm going to go to Server. I'm going to select a profile. Profiles are based on the appliance type. So BDDS 20 or DNS DHCP 20 has certain specs, right? And depending if it's virtual or physical, they can have iDRAC access as an example. But I'm just going to select the 45. And again, this is just profile. It doesn't really affect the amount of RAM already assigned to the BDS if it's physical or virtual. This is more for organization purposes. So if I purchase the 45 from BlueCat, I know if I go to my server list, that was a 45, right? So, and I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call this DNS DHCP server, because that's what it's going to be. The interface, which we already set, is 192.168.1.16.11. The host name, make sure there's no spaces or special characters. This is going to be the host name of the appliance, which I'm just going to call DNS DHCP server. Make sure that there's a check where it says connect to server because we want it to. And the password, this is a deployment password. There's many different types of accounts in Address Manager on the BDDS. This is the deployment account, and the password specifically is the deployment password. The password by default is BlueCat. One word, all lowercase, BlueCat. Okay, and then you can also specify location, right? So in this example, I'm just going to say I'm from Argentina. Okay, and then I'm going to select detect server settings. If you don't hit detect server settings, you won't be able to add it. Okay, so make sure you hit detect server settings and you get a green light. Okay, there's other options here. Again, we'll go through it in future videos, but for now, I'm just going to skip that and go add. Once we've added the server into Address Manager, then we can start assigning roles to that server. So I label it as DNS DHCP server. So I'm going to give it both roles. I'm going to give it both the DNS and the DHCP role. And I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So you can see it's been added. You can see the service IP address. So clients that want a lease for DHCP, they would go to this IP address to get a lease. Because I'm also going to make it a DNS server, this is the IP address to go to for DNS services. Okay. As an example, rather than Google uses 8.8.8.8, this IP address is going to be 192.168.1.16.11. Now, if this was an XHA, right, we would set a VIP. And I'll talk more about that in another video. But for now, let's go to the IP space. So in this example, I created a block, which was a 10/8. And in there, I created a network, which is a 10/8. And just to show you, to create any network, you would just enter the network here, right? So you can do whatever you want, /24 as an example, and different options. But I've already created it. So now that I've created this network, right, I want to assign this network to the server that we just added to Address Manager. So to do that, I would go to roles or deployment roles. I would go to new. Because this is a network, I want to add it as a DHCP role. I want to make it as a master and select the server interface. It gives me the option of the only server I've added, and I'm going to hit add. There is the failover configuration for specifically DHCP. You have the ability to create a failover relationship for redundancy reasons. And load balancing, but for now, I'm not going to do that because I don't have another server, and we'll talk more about that and how to configure it and some caveats and certain different ways that we can architect that integration into your environment. So, but for now, I'm just going to hit add. Okay, so we can see the service is DHCP, the role is master, and the server assigned to that role is the server that we just added to Address Manager. Awesome. Okay, so let's go to the DNS tab. So if I click on it again, I have the two views. I have the external and internal. Let's go to the internal. I want the subdomain example.com. I want the server that I just recently added. I want that to be assigned to that server, that role. So I'm going to go to deployment roles. I'm going to DNS role. Now here, you have different types of roles that can be. So depending if I'm authoritative for that zone, it's internal, so technically I can be authoritative for it if I want. But depending on the zone, depending on the records, depending on what you are authoritative for, what you're not authoritative for, you have different options. So in terms of authoritative, you can be master for the zone. It can be a hidden master. We'll definitely talk about what a hidden master is and compare it to a master. A slave, self-slave, force, AD integrated master, and much more. So there's many different profiles or types of DNS roles that you can configure, but for this one, it's just going to be a master. Okay, so I select the server interface, the only server listed, and I hit add. Okay, perfect. So now this has the service role of DNS. The role is master. And the server that I assigned the role to is the server here. And if I were to go back to the servers tab, select the server, and go to associated roles, I can see that it has both DHCP master as well as DNS master roles. DNS master for example.com, DHCP master for this block. Now it can be master for the network, but I set it at the block level. Okay, so now that I've added those roles to that one particular server, then the last step to this is I have to deploy. And again, to deploy means that if I want my servers to have those roles, I have to push those roles to the server. And the verbiage used in BlueCat is deploy. So I need to deploy those changes, those roles to the server by doing the following. So I select the server that I want to deploy. I go to action and I select deploy. I can also validate deployments, the validity of the deployments before they're actually deployed to the server. But for now, I'm just going to deploy. Okay, and here it asks what service it is. So I don't have to deploy both services, even though there's a role assigned to the server. I could, for in terms of DHCP or DNS. For DNS, for example, I could be staging a lot of those zones, and I'm not ready to deploy it into my production environment. So in that case, but I still need to deploy the server. So in that case, I'll deselect DNS and I'll just deploy DHCP, and I will hit yes. Okay, so normally what would happen is you see a progression, and then it'll eventually say successful. What we can see here, though, it says the results is failed, right? And there's this this X here. So what I need to do is quickly verify why did my deployment fail by going to the deployments that occurred more than 10 minutes ago. Okay, so what I would want to do is go to the last deployment made, which was this one. As you can see, it's a hyperlink. You click on it. None of this is hyperlinks except for this. Okay, so note that it's not as apparent that this is a hyperlink. Okay, so once I click on it, I can see event summary. And there's other places I can see a summary of my deployments, but this is one way of doing it. So I can see deployment finished for this server, deployment analyzing, DHCP deployment failed. Now why? It says Address Manager license expired. Okay, awesome. My Address Manager is not licensed. This is just a demo, so it isn't licensed. And in the next couple of videos, I will of course license it. So because there's going to be deployments and validation and testing that you're going to want to see, and I need to license it. So I'll license that. That's not going to be a problem at all. But in this case, this was just to show you the fact that there are events that we can, or logs that we can look at to understand exactly why something has failed. So this is very clear and apparent. I can't deploy because my Address Manager is not licensed, and that completely makes sense. Okay, so hey, really appreciate everyone's time. Let me know if this quick demo was useful for anyone. Let me know what everyone wants to see. I'm hoping that it's going to get more involved. And again, I'm going to be talking not just about Address Manager and all the options here, but I'm going to talk a lot more about different ways of implementing DNS and DHCP, best practices in terms of where DNS needs to be, right, internally, externally, for which records, why you wouldn't want to enable recursion on your internal authoritative servers, why you wouldn't want to use DNSSEC, and why you wouldn't want to use DNSSEC. So we definitely talk about caveats in both cases. And then we can also talk about different other products that BlueCat offers, including Gateway and DNS Edge. So I appreciate everyone's time, and I look forward to more videos in the very near future. Thanks.